Here's what you need to know about Hurricane Florence. It is shaping up to deliver disaster for days to the Carolina coast.
The National Weather Service describes it as, quote, the storm of a lifetime.
North Carolina is about to face the power of Hurricane Florence.
The eye of Hurricane Florence is expected right here in Wilmington imminently. Wind gusts reported up to 97 miles per hour right on the coast. This morning, Hurricane Florence now crashing into the Carolina coast as fears of catastrophic flooding have already been realized.
Hey friends, my name is Julie.
I'm Daryl.
And welcome back to our farm. Today we're going to talk to you a little bit about hurricane preparedness. Here in eastern North Carolina, we have to be really vigilant about hurricane season from June through November. So pretty much all summer long. We're watching the radar daily, and if any storms are on the horizon, we know we need to get prepared.
So I know everyone's gonna groan when they hear me say this, but here in eastern North Carolina, we really haven't had a major hurricane hit the coast since 2018 when Hurricane Florence rolled through and decimated our area. Hurricane Florence made landfall as a Category 1 hurricane in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, which is about 45 minutes away from us. Hurricane Florence at a Category 1 was really slow, and the danger with it was that it dropped a lot of rain on an already saturated land. So we had historic flooding. The winds weren't too powerful, but they were still enough to knock over trees and cause power outages.
So the forecast leading up to Florence had it as a Category 4, and we really thought we were going to get hard by very high, strong winds. But instead, like Daryl said, it came in at a Category 1 and slowed way down and basically sat over our area and dumped enormous amounts of rain for 4 days straight. For us personally, one of the biggest hardships from Florence was the day the storm started, we had a tree limb come down on our power line. So we had no power to the house for a full 8 days. We were one of the last houses that the power company came to in the aftermath.
During those 8 days without power, though, we did not lose any animals. We did not lose any of our product because we had prepared, and that's what we're going to show you in this video, is some of those steps that we went through to prepare our animals, to prepare our farm, and to safeguard against any loss of life or product.
So we'll go over some of the strategies that we employed to get through Hurricane Florence and the ways that we prepare for future hurricanes here on the farm. So once you know a hurricane is on its way, one of the first decisions that you need to make is whether you're going to stay or you're going to go. And for us, we have way too many animals that we are responsible for the lives of. We're always going to stay. Even if there's an evacuation order or we know our lives are in danger, the responsibility to take care of these animals trumps all of that.
Now, for you, if you decide to leave and you can take all your animals with you, that is a great decision to make. That is probably the safest decision for you and your animals, if you can do that. For us, we can't, like Julie stated.
But if you do decide for your own safety that you need to get the heck out of here, you do that. And my best advice, if you have to leave animals behind, is make sure they have access to a shelter, access to plenty of food for up to 2 weeks that you may be separated from them. And I would give them a way to get out.
During Florence, a lot of the commercial farms around us didn't give their animals adequate exit from their barns, and a lot of them wound up perishing within the floodwaters.
You definitely don't want your animals trapped in a flooding building, and electric fences are probably going to do you no good. So hopefully you have some kind of decent perimeter fence so the animals will stay on your property, but I wouldn't try to really contain them more than that. You want them to be able to get out of dangerous situations and find food on their own if they have to.
So since we're out here by the pigs, we're going to go over what we did for our pigs during Florence and some of the things that you're going to want to consider for them specifically. First off, if you've seen our other videos, you know that we use 2-strand poly wire to fence in large areas to keep our pigs in.
The only way this thin wire works to keep pigs in is because it's electrified. And we do that either through solar chargers or we have one that's plugged into the electricity. And neither of those are going to do you any good if you lose power and you're flooded. At the time of Florence, we were relying on solar chargers, and those are expensive. We decided to pick those up and store them safely. which meant that the pigs could leave their fence anytime. So while the storm was raging, our pigs were actually running loose for part of that, just trying to find any patch of dry land or shelter that they could take. But once things calmed down a little bit, luckily we had this hog panel pen set up, and we were able to herd all our pigs in here and then contain them. Now, I don't want to do that when it's flooding because they could possibly get flooded out in this area, but after things calmed down, this was a safe place to keep them before we could get the electricity restored. Now, luckily we already had this on the property, but a simple pen like this is really easy to make from cattle panels or hog panels and just some T-posts or old fence posts you have laying around. It doesn't have to be big because it's a very temporary solution. When it comes to deciding what to do with our dogs during a hurricane, the decision is easy. Wherever we go, they go. The only extra consideration with these guys is that we had to make sure we were stocked up on enough food for them for at least 2 weeks. And if we had older dogs or dogs with any health issues, we would make sure we had all their medications on hand and extra if we needed to. Now, these are super active dogs that are used to running around outside all day, every day. So if they're going to be cooped up in the house, you might want to think about having some extra chew toys or treats or something, something to keep them occupied. Now, the easiest animal that we had to prepare things for were the ducks. They're already free-ranging, so we didn't have to worry about that. We really only had to make sure that they had access to food and a somewhat dry area. So we put some in our carport here. We also had some back in a shelter that the pigs are using now, and that worked fine for them. They actually loved it. They had a party. They were playing in puddles in the pond, and yeah, they really enjoyed the hurricane quite a bit.
As far as our chickens go, because of the way we have our coops made, they are really light and they are susceptible to being picked up by the wind because of the tarps. So what we do to mitigate this problem is, if we're not expecting really high winds, is we'll stake the coops down with some like rebar stakes or some bent metal. We might even consider taking the tarp off, because in high winds it's just going to get ripped and torn up anyways. That way the wind can move through the cage wire, and as soon as the storm is past, we'll come and put the tarp back on. Yeah, that option kind of sucks for the chickens because they don't really have any protection from the rain other than just to huddle down. But in a windstorm, this tarp really just becomes a sail to pick this thing up and put it in the trees, which we've had happen before. With this one.
What we ended up doing with our chicken coops during Hurricane Florence was to sidle them up next to buildings. I think we put one near the house, between the house and the RV, and then we put one by the lambing barn with a truck next to it. So they were kind of pinned in, we strapped them down, we staked the corners with rebar like Daryl said. We did have to take the tarps off, but they had some protection from the building that they were next to. As soon as it was safe to, we put the tarps back on to give them a little more shelter.
And other than that, the chickens did great. I think we had some turkeys at that time also, and everyone did wonderful. They weathered the storm very well.
Yeah, I think our turkeys got out and roamed around, but they did all survive, and that's the important thing. Now, our sheep were one of my biggest concerns when the hurricane was coming. We rotate this flock of sheep on pasture daily, so they're moving all over our farm as well as a lot of our neighbors' property. And to do that, we use these portable electric fences along with a solar charger to energize it. And this is great under normal weather conditions, but like we said with the pigs, I'm not gonna leave one of these very expensive chargers out here in floodwaters. So first step was that we had to put these away and rely on just the nets to keep our sheep in. And luckily they've been trained for years to stay in these fences, and very rarely have we ever had a sheep get out whether the fence is electrified or not. If you're relying on these portable electric net fences and you don't have a way to electrify it, one solution is to double fence it like a deer fence. So you're putting up 2 perimeter fences about a foot apart from one another. In my experience, sheep won't really mess with a double fence. Another thing we did was move them to a pasture on our property that has a woven wire perimeter fence. So if they were to get out of this electric fence, they would have a secondary containment. The other reason we moved them to that part of the property was because that's where their lambing barn, which is really just a lean-to shelter with some makeshift stalls, is. And that was what we used for their primary shelter during the storm. One of the great things about sheep is that they're very weather resistant, especially when it comes to rain. A lot of times, especially if they have a little bit of wool on them, these sheep don't even seem to notice if it's raining. It might bother them when it hits their ears a little bit, but they'll just continue grazing as if it's not even happening most of the time. Now, in the torrential downpour, of course, they were using the shelter, but they weren't afraid to go out and eat some grass if they wanted to. More importantly, in my mind, it's a place to keep their hay dry. So we put their hay bale, big round bale, right in this center section. They can all access it and it stays dry and fresh in here. Another nice thing about the animals being at this barn in particular is that we have a rainwater catch system set up. So we don't need to run any hoses. We don't need our well pump functioning. We can just pull water right from this, and we set our water trough right here on this concrete, and then we know the animals have easy access to fresh water. Portable shelters like this one that have tarps on them just become sails in a windstorm like a hurricane. So these really did us no good. We couldn't leave these with the animals. They're more of a danger from blowing around in the wind than they are helpful to the animal. You really need a fixed structure barn or a lean-to shelter if you're gonna leave your animals out in a storm. Now, after the storm, we had floodwaters that didn't recede for about 2 weeks. Now, luckily our property was kind of an island. All the roads around us were flooded, so we really couldn't go anywhere, but our property itself did not hold a ton of water. It's really good at shedding water, either into our pond or into a stream bed that lines one side of our property. So any water that did build up was quickly diverted into those areas. But it did leave the ground muddy and soggy, and that's not great for sheep feet. So following the storm, we had to be really vigilant about watching for foot scald or foot rot. We went through and trimmed a lot of them and put a varnish on that's meant for horse hooves to try and seal them against any water damage. We also had a really bad outbreak of tapeworms, which is common in super wet conditions. Coccidia is another one that you really have to watch out for in your animals in those really wet conditions.
Preparations for the goats are very similar to what we did for the sheep. One thing that we do a little bit different, whereas Julie said that we put our sheep into the lambing barn, which is more like a lean-to, we put our goats into a more substantial structure to ensure that they have a place that they can stay absolutely dry. In the lean-to, rain can kind of blow in there depending on which way the wind is blowing during the hurricane. Goats really dislike they really dislike being wet, so we wanted to ensure that they had a place to stay out of the wind and rain. So for the goats, we used our milking barn for them. One of the things that you have to consider when you're putting your goats and sheep into buildings or semi-permanent areas is that you're going to need hay, because you're no longer grazing them, so you're going to need at least 2 weeks of hay on hand and a way to keep it dry.
So this ugly structure is an old mobile home that was left on our property. And this past year we put in quite a bit of work converting this to a proper goat barn for the winter. But at the time of Florence hit, this was really nothing more than the ruins of an old mobile home. And we had to very quickly turn it into a shelter. We don't have barns or a lot of permanent structures at all on this property, so we kind of had to make do with what we had.
We don't move our animals, the sheep or the goats, to these permanent structures until right before we know the storm is going to hit. We do this because we know they're not going to like to be cooped up. It's a lot of stress moving them from their normal routines into confined space. So we try not to do that until we absolutely have to.
Yeah, during the summer, our animals get really used to their daily paddock moves, and they really love eating that fresh green grass. So putting them in a barn in the middle of summer where they just have access to hay is not their favorite thing. But believe me, when the storm hit, the goats were very, very happy to be in here, and they happily just slept through most of the storm. So once you make sure that all your animals are going to be safe, it's time to think about your home and yourself.
So as far as your home goes, you're going to want to board up windows or tape windows. This protects them from flying debris. You're going to also want to pick up a lot of loose debris around your house, maybe trim your bushes back a little.
Yeah, anything that can blow around in a storm, you want to either put away or secure down tightly.
You're going to want to park your vehicles away from trees, maybe if you're on a farm like ours, out in an open field. That's some of the best protection from falling debris that you can do for them.
And if you have any sketchy branches near your house that look like they're going to fall, or dead trees that might come down in a storm, you want to go ahead and get rid of those ahead of time.
Something else as far as preparing your home. Here where we're at, we inevitably always lose power. Like we said before, during Florence, we went 8 days without power. Now we have a small generator, or maybe a mid-sized generator is what I'd really say. It can power a few things in our home, like a few of our freezers, our water pump, but it's not big enough to power our hot water heater or our AC unit. Those are things you're gonna have to consider when you start thinking about trying to get a generator. Are you trying to power your whole home, or are you just trying to power essentials? Another thing to consider with a generator is, for us, we have it wired into our home so that we can just turn it on, plug it in, and it'll send electricity throughout the house. Now, if you're going to do that, I want to really stress to you that before turning your generator on, you need to have your master circuit breaker turned off. Because if you leave it on, it'll energize the rest of the lines and could potentially harm the linemen that are trying to get your power back on.
Now, we're running a meat business, so we have tons of frozen product in our freezers. And this was a big concern going into Florence. When we did lose power, like Daryl said, we really had to focus the generator on keeping those freezers going. One of the best things that you can do is consolidate all your frozen product down as much as you can into 1 or 2 freezers. Chest freezers will hold their frozen state a lot longer than the stand-ups. And once stuff's in there, you really don't want to open it if you don't have to. We got away with running the generator, I think, 4 hours in the morning and a couple hours in the evening. And that kept all our product cold and safe. So if you're storing a lot of meat or other frozen product, preparing those freezers ahead of time will really help preserve it. We heard a lot of sad stories of people losing like whole cows because they weren't able to power their house and keep that meat safe.
That's one of the drawbacks about making the decision to leave, is that you're not here to monitor some of those critical systems like your freezers or water, things like that. With us staying, we knew immediately that we lost power. We knew that we had to get the generator hooked up, and we knew that we had to protect our products and our animals. And we were here, so that helped us out. Something else to take into consideration is with the loss of power, we all use electric pumps here to pump water throughout the farm. You're going to need some large containers like these here to store additional water in. They're good for water rain catchments.
Yeah, having a way to filter that water or at least boil it and sanitize it is something to think about ahead of time.
Fuel was another issue during Florence because of the electricity and the flooding. You couldn't really get gas, so you need to make those plans and have additional fuel on hand to power your generator, your tractors, your vehicles.
Really any of those consumable supplies that you rely on just going to the store, either the gas station or the grocery store, to stock up on a regular basis, you need to think about stocking up on ahead of time. So you need to have your gas, your diesel, your propane, whatever you're going to need to run your generator and your grill. so that you can cook. Yeah, you need to think about household supplies. So having like enough toilet paper and towels and clean bedding and clean clothes, because you're not going to be able to do laundry on a regular basis if you have no power. For us, we knew we were going to have to be outside in the storm multiple times a day to take care of our animals. So we needed to have all our rain gear ready to go. Make sure you have a first aid kit and that it is fully stocked. You want to have your flashlights, radios, and anything battery powered you want to have extra batteries for, or have all of those batteries charged ahead of time.
One of the things that I didn't realize was going to come in so handy is we have a Bluetooth portable radio speaker that I bought from Sam's Club. It picks up AM and FM radio, and it has a large battery in it. It can play the radio for about 110 hours on a single charge. That became very important. Radio stations in our area, they banded together to keep broadcasting, so you knew where you could possibly go get fuel. You knew where you possibly could go get food, what restaurants were open, what grocery stores might open. That was very important to us, and it was something that I didn't really take into consideration until Florence happened. That was really a good source of local information. It was even better than what the internet could provide at that time.
Yeah. We could also charge small items like our phone off of that battery. So that was super useful. It's also good to have a lot of cash on hand if services do become available, because if the power is out, then things like ATM machines and credit card readers probably aren't going to be working. Along with that, you may want to think about having a means of personal protection with you. Looting is real in times of disaster, unfortunately, and you want to have a way to protect you and your property.
Seen it in Katrina.
Yeah. Yeah, Daryl got to experience Hurricane Katrina down in Louisiana as well. So
Yep.
he knows all about violence and looting post-hurricane.
Yeah.
Another thing to think about is the lack of income that you're probably going to experience after a really bad storm. All the roads around us were flooded, so we couldn't go anywhere. And even if we could, businesses weren't open. So our off-farm jobs weren't open for us to make any money at. And our big main source of income from the farm is through farmers markets, which are all the way in Wilmington, which is about a 45-minute drive from here. And we just simply could not get there. There was no way for a vehicle to get through. And there wouldn't have been any customers or a farmer's market for us to sell at anyway. So we went several weeks without any income coming in. And luckily, there were a lot of programs around here to help out farmers like us in that situation. Plus, we have extremely loyal and wonderful customers that came out and supported us hugely afterwards. So we were able to ride that out, but it is something to think about ahead of time.
And that kind of leads into the last thing that we want to touch on is after the storm. After you made sure all your animals are safe, you're safe, it's at that point that you want to go out and start checking on your neighbors. We have elderly neighbors that run a horse farm right across the street. We check on them. We have other friends that are around, other farmers that needed help. Because we have a small tractor, we have chainsaws and axes. We were able to get out into the community, help clear out some of the trees and debris. But if you're going to do something like that, you have to really know what you're capable of and what you are comfortable doing. You don't want to get into something that creates a hazard for you or for your gear or for somebody else.
Delving into floodwaters can be super dangerous. You never know when that water is going to start to rise again. And there's just all kinds of chemicals and bacteria in that floodwater that is super dangerous. Contact with your skin can even cause disease.
They'll be down power lines. I don't mess with anything. I never touch a power line. I will call the power company immediately and let them know, hey, there's a power line down at this intersection or something like that. I do not deal with that. Electricity kind of scares me.
As it should.
Yeah. But helping out the community is important too, because everyone is going to need help. During Florence, we had neighbors that their houses were completely submerged. Something that was unique that I had just gotten a drone. I was able to go and kind of fly through those areas with my drone and take some video and search for where people might be or check on belongings or see where animals are. So that was something that I was able to do that other people didn't have at that time. So little things like that can really help out in your community.
Yeah, and then there were a lot of people that didn't have food stored and didn't realize that there weren't going to be grocery stores open for 2 weeks after the storm. So we went out and donated a lot of our product to some of these food drives and even to individual families along some of the flooded areas.
So it's been a while for us. Florence was the last one. That was 2018. So we're over 3 years now that we have seen a major hurricane in southeastern North Carolina. It's just a matter of time. At the time of filming this, we have a tropical storm that's right off the coast currently. So that's what kind of prompted us to make this video.
Yeah, this time of year, we're basically watching the radar like a hawk. We rely on a couple of websites that have really good radar tracking. Of course, the National Hurricane Center is a great resource. And I really like Mike's weather page on Facebook. He does a great job of putting all of those models into layman's terms.
My favorite place for getting this information, I use Weather Underground. I've been using them since 1999 when I was stationed in Okinawa. They're a weather aggregator, really. They have a lot of different data points that they pull together, and they have a nice interactive map. Their Wonder Map is really good.
So we really hope that you never have to actually live through a hurricane like we did in 2018. But if it's gonna hit, it's best to be prepared. And we hope that some of the tips in this video help you do that. If you wanna learn how we help protect our animals against our intense summer heat here in North Carolina, you can check out this video right here. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.